Hello?
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm usually terrified of being on stage because I'm with a bunch of strangers. You don't know where panels will lead you. But today, I'm so thrilled to be working working with these three gorgeous women and looking at our journeys together as agent and writer. I'm going to start by saying it's a very kind of complex beast, this line that we walk between writer and agent. And I thought I'd make it a little fun by asking each of them how they find us. So writers, Jacaranda is a very quiet agency. We have 5 women. We work with about 150 authors. We're not driven by geography, but by books that we love. So if anybody submits a book to us and we like it, we don't think about where it's set, as long as we love the writing, we'll take it on. And often we forget about how that journey started. So I thought I'd start at that little point about where did it begin. So Trisha and I have worked together, I don't know, 10 years, 12 years?
16 years.
16 years. I don't remember how we met, but she has a great story. Trisha, I represent Trisha and I always will. Saranya is our newest kid on the block, and she is represented by my colleague Radhika Shah, who's in the audience. Akshita Nanda, I started working with her at the beginning, but now she's wonderfully represented by my colleague Smita Khanna Bajaj. So I'm going to start with Trish and ask her how she found me.
Okay, so this is an interesting story. At least to me it is. In 2009, I published a small collection of short stories, and I saw Jacaranda's website at the time, and I was like, wouldn't it be amazing? And I had a manuscript, and I was like, wouldn't it be amazing to be represented by an agent? And I knew about Jayapriya. So I applied, I submitted the manuscript online, and I got no response. A year later, in 2010, I was writing this new novel, and I had a few chapters ready, and I was like, wouldn't it be amazing if Jayapriya could read the first few chapters of my novel? And I submitted the chapters on your website, and I got no response. So finally, I gave up, and I was like, forget that. One day, I was at an art gallery, and the artist just happened to be there. And we were talking about her art, and she said, what do you do? I was like, I'm a filmmaker, but now I want to write books. I'm writing my first novel. And she's like, oh, that's wonderful. Do you have an agent? And I'm like, no. She's like, well, I know an agent. She's a really good friend of mine. Have you heard of Jayapriya Vasudevan? And I didn't say, well, I've applied twice to her website and been completely ignored. But I was like, yeah, I have, it would be nice to meet her. She's like, well, Jayapriya is having a party next month, and I'm invited, and I'm the artist that she's featuring at her party. Why don't you come along? So I went to the party. I basically gate crashed your party. And I took a bottle of wine, and I took my book. And I found Jayapriya at the party, and I was like, I'm a new author. I've published this small collection of short stories. I'd love for you to take a look at it and see what you think. And then I went back home, and for 2 months I heard nothing. And then finally, 2 months later, I get a call from Jayapriya. And she said, that night, I gave your book to Krishna Uday Shankar, who went on to write the best-selling Aryavad series. I gave your book to one of my authors, Krishna. She read it, called me up and said, you have to represent this author. And so fine, I'm going to represent you. I have a 2-year contract. So let's see how it happens and how you go after 2 years. So I signed with Jay, and it took me 5 years to finish the novel. And the contract lasted for 2 years. And I don't think we've ever renewed that contract.
And we never will.
And we never will. No, but that's how we met, and that's how we started.
And so with Trish and I, I'm going to just continue this conversation. So Trish and I began working together, as she says, 16 years ago. And I love working with her because she challenges me. She comes to me with crazy ideas. And, this is the first. So the first thing I have to say is I'm so sorry. I'm very slow. It's true. It's a fact. I respond to emails very late. Also a fact. But what I do and what our agents do is we're very engaged with anything we take on. And Trish challenges me all the time by, wanting to try new genres, wanting to try new kinds of writing. And every time that happens, I represent her. So I have to jump on that same train and say, Yes, we'll do this, and not be discouraging. But she has another story, I know that, and we'll come to that later. Saranya, how did you find us?
Yeah, so my story is also quite fun to me because I run the Bombay Poetry Crawl. I take people on literary walks of the city, and I think it was January 2024 or 2025, I can't remember, when I was hosting a walk in Worli Kolivada, which is a fishing village in Worli in Bombay, and we were reading Adil Jasawala's poems. And this was just another very early morning for me, 8 o'clock, the crack of dawn. And I started leading this walk, and I just was speaking to one of the people who was there, and I was like, "What's your name?" She said, "I'm Radhika." She had come back from New York, I think, at the time. And I was like, "Oh, what do you do?" And she says, "I work in an agency at Jacaranda." And immediately my mind went off because I had attended the Bangalore world famous Super Deluxe writing workshop in 2019, during which you had given a talk, Jay, about agencies in the publishing world. And immediately I was like, oh, I think she's Anjum Hassan's agent. And Anjum was my first teacher, and like she's one of the greatest writers of all time. So immediately I was like, oh wow, that's amazing. So I said, oh, I happen to have a finished poetry manuscript, and I was really struggling at this time because everyone told me that no one takes on poetry, no agents, no publishers will publish poetry unless you are well known. So I'd pretty much given up by then. So I just said it in passing that I have a manuscript, and she was like, yeah, sure, send it to me. And I said, sure. I sent it to her, and I think after a couple of months is when Radhika responded. And it was just so wonderful because here's someone who actually read poetry and who was passionate about it, and we loved it. And we met through poetry, which I think is the best story. And and she actually convinced me to think about a second book, which I would have never thought of. And so yeah, I think it was Radhika's passion, but also someone believing in poetry, which I have never seen before. Yeah.
Would you like to hold up?
Yeah. So yeah, the book is finally out.
Yeah, it's out.
Thank you, Radhika. It's called Absent People, Absent Places. This is the very same manuscript I was talking about. I finished it in 2022. And I think I started writing these poems 6 years ago. And I had pretty much accepted the fact that poetry is a dead end and you don't write to be published or read. But I guess sometimes life surprises you. So this is available at the bookstore here at JLF, so please pick it up if you can. But much thanks to Radhika and Jay.
Yeah. So, it was quite serendipitous. Radhika and I went to the bookstore yesterday morning. We were just browsing at a quiet time, and we felt we could look at books ourselves. And we were there when the books were delivered. We didn't expect it this week. It was a shock to us that they were here in Jaipur, but so delighted that, we could see this entire journey through here. Akshita, you?
So like many writers, I am an avid reader, and I sometimes read more than I write. I pay the bills, and it is one of my vocations to be a journalist. And I had been an editor in the publishing industry before, for science publishing and textbooks and things like that. So I wanted to do a feature series explaining what the industry was like to readers in Singapore, which has a burgeoning arts scene and thriving literary scene, but this was like 10, 15 years ago. And so I interviewed the editor who signed J.K. Rowling and brought out Harry Potter. And then I wanted to interview agents, and a friend of mine basically introduced me to Jay. She was a source for many years. And then we ran into each other at a literary festival in Singapore, and Jay was exhausted, and she and her agent, her colleague Helen, were sitting and talking, and including me in the conversation. And then Jay looked at me and said, are you writing a novel? I said, well, I've written one. And she said, send it to me. I said, okay. And I did send it to her, and eventually she sent it on to Smita for, editing, polishing, etc. And Smita was the first person outside my family to read that book. And Jay called me, and she said, well, I've sent it to somebody to read. And there was a pause. And in that pause, I nearly had a heart attack. And then she said, she loves the book. And then I don't know what else she said because I was crying. And I was crying, and I was crying, and I was crying, and then I met Smita. And Smita has also read and helped to bring out my second book. She and Jay brought out Beauty Queens of Bishan, which is in the bookstore. And I'm sure it's at a very reasonable price. Please go check it out. It's about if a beauty pageant was run by somebody who failed to make Hillary Clinton president of the US. And so we've just been journeying ever since. And they are so patient with me because, like Trisha, I like to experiment. I like to do different things. I write the stories I'm interested in because for my day job, I have to write the stories other people are interested in. So my third book, which has been 5 years in the writing and rewriting, I think I've rewritten it about 6 times. So technically, in 5 years, I've written 6 novels, none of which are published. But when I told Jay about it, I said, look, it's a spy thriller in which an Indian raw agent falls in love with a Chinese spy. Pin drop silence. This time, I think she nearly had a heart attack. And then she went, okay. And I could hear her thinking through this. So you are obviously a writer. You'll always be literary. And I heard that, okay, I'll always be literary. And you will reinvent yourself. You'll be genre bending. And it was a very big novel back when I first sent it to her in 2023. It is a slightly smaller novel now. But now the market has gone back to big novels. But all I'm saying, and Smita has read a couple of pages that I allowed her to over coffee. I bribed her with a muffin. And it's just amazing because they're with me. They trust me. Writing is like being a ship unmoored adrift on the sea. You're trying to find a horizon. You're trying to find land. There's maybe a storm around you. You can see nothing. And then your agent's phone comes. And then you remember someone is believing in you and shore is nearby. So I'm very grateful to them.
I think I'd like to actually add on to that. When it comes to genres, experimenting with different genres and stuff like that, it's a challenge because let's face it, when something is successful, publishers want more of that, right? More of the same thing. And as authors who want to only write what we're excited by, actually a lot of the time it conflicts with what our publishers are wanting out of us. And I have to say that every time, and then what you want and what I've got with Jay is somebody who says, all right, well, you've written time travel fantasy, now you want to write romance, but everybody wants you to write mythology because you've had a very successful mythology book. Instead of saying, hey, why don't you do this? She's like, all right, let's work with what you're excited by. And so many times after a book, when an editor or someone has said, hey, I want you to explore writing this because this is what's selling right now, you've always been like, write the book that wants to come out. And I've always gone with that and followed my heart with the books, and that's made your life very, very difficult, I know. But that you've allowed me to do that is a great thing, and thank you for that, yeah.
Well, I'm going to respond to that, saying like maybe this is a good time to say what an agent does. So the first thing is writers find us somehow. We do have more than 150. And once they find us, we talk to them about what they're working on. Some books are in very early stages. For fiction, we need the book to be complete. We can't read it midway. We can't read 3 chapters. We absolutely need to know, if it's a murder mystery, who killed who. We need to know that. We need those answers. And so for fiction, we come in, when it's done. And for nonfiction, we're very happy. If you're a specialist in your subject and you write the first 3 chapters and a very detailed proposal, which you can find anywhere online, on any website. And that's where our journey starts. So, it has to start with belief that you can't guarantee a sale ever, but you have to believe that you can sell it. You have to believe that you can take that piece of writing and go far enough. And I'm going to also say one thing, I'm very lucky to have these 3 champions here. But for us, like half of our work is the writing, and the second half of our work is really the people and our relationships with them. So on the one hand, we work with our writers very closely to make sure their work is of a certain standard. It also has the voice, like sometimes it's in your head. what you want to write is in your head and it's not quite come out. So we work with them till we're sure that that is the book that needs to be submitted. We have one shot. Remember that. Put your best work forward because we have one shot. If it's sort of declined, it's because we all haven't done our jobs in some sense. So we work very closely on that part of it, making sure the work is ready. And sometimes it can be quite hard. Sometimes, we can have arguments. And I always say I'm like Snoopy, speak softly, carry a big stick. So we have to have a certain standard, and we do. And our writers know that, and we have 100% faith in their capacity to make their work good. So I really wanted to ask Trisha something about a book that didn't quite happen and how you felt. So Trish started off writing dazzling, retellings of mythology, very successful, very popular. And, we had a publisher, great price point. We were all really pleased with how they were doing. And then she decided to change genre. And while we always say, write the book that you want to write, we also have to come back to that little voice that says, we need to be able to sell it. We need to be able to, you're not writing the book for you, you're writing it for another audience. So Trish has a story about a book that didn't quite go the way it went, and then I'll respond to that.
Yeah, so I had published at that point, I think 4 books. So, after you've published 4 books, you kind of think, okay, all my books are going to get published. I've got a good network, I've got a good agent, so it should work. But this time I decided to go non-fiction, and I wrote about being a mother and becoming a mother. And so my own personal journey. And it was a humor book, it was funny. But it was about my life story, and technically it was non-fiction. And I've been doing fiction the entire time. And I remember I sent it to you, and you were like, we're falling over our chairs laughing. And then everyone who read it was like, oh my God, this is so funny. And we sent it to the publisher, and the publisher sat on it for a while, I think just out of politeness, because they didn't want to say no. But eventually, when we met them, they were like, we love the book, we absolutely love it, but we can't sell it. And if we can't sell it, then we can't publish it. And I think that was, for me, that was a big blow, because, I think publishing a book and then publishing 4 books, it gives you a certain amount of confidence. And as an artist, you are this extremely fragile creature, insecure, fragile creature. And the minute someone says no, all of a sudden your entire self-esteem plummets to the ground, and you're like, nobody wants me, So we went through quite a bit of a crisis together because of that.
So, this comes to another point about being an agent, which is that when a writer gets rejected, we get rejected. We take it very personally. It really upsets us, and then I always sleep on it. I never, ever ring. I'm not trigger happy about letting the writer know. I think about it, and I think about why the book has got rejected, and then I call the writer. But also, I think it's important to understand that as agents, we face rejection every single day. Not every book gets bought. And sometimes it's just not the right time for the book. So this memoir that Trisha is talking about, we're going to submit it now, and I feel 100% confident that we'll sell it. 100%. So I think
and
the
that's
timing
11 years later.
So, sometimes it's just not the right time, but we also, rejection is very hard to handle, but we have their back. This is a long relationship. It's almost like a marriage in many ways. So, we talk about it. We talk about how somebody is feeling. And I think that writers need to understand that we feel terrible too, because it's sort of judging us as much as it's judging the writer.
And also not to have a knee-jerk reaction towards the agent. And I feel a lot of authors do that. The minute a book gets rejected, the first thing is, well, the agent must have done something wrong, And so the first instinct when everyone around you is like, no, if you went somewhere else and marketed it with someone else, it'll probably sell. So I think it's important for authors as well not to have those knee-jerk reactions and really try and understand without ego, why the book didn't sell and why it's okay that it didn't sell and that you've got more books inside of you, But I feel like a lot of authors make it about that, you know.
Actually, if I could bring up some advice you gave me to include in the article about 15 years ago, and it's still valid. Jaya told me that the minute an author sends her manuscript, her advice to the author is, go write your next book. And when I heard that, I went, really? Okay, because imagine this, you've labored for so many years, probably, blood, sweat, and tears, and then you're asking the author to trust you with the baby, and then go make another one. But it's advice I have followed, and it's some of the best advice I have received, because it's like giving up on one marriage to enter another.
But the thing is, this brings us to an important point about time. So yes, I mean, I've been sort of called out on how long I take to respond, and it's a fact, and I'll own it, and I'll wear a badge. But the thing is, it takes time. So for us, when we get a manuscript and it's ready, we write a very detailed pitch, and very much in partnership with the author. Because it's not my book, it's her book and her book and her book. So we sit down and write a very detailed pitch, and one of the things I like to know for every single writer is, why did you write this book? Why is this story so important to tell? Because I think publishers don't just buy a single book, they buy the work of authors. They want to believe that there are more books in the pipeline, that they're buying a body of work, not a single book. So which means we need to get to the backstories, and we're very excited about that part of it. So when we're writing the pitch and sending it out in submission, and this is something that I know Saranya will respond to, but very often when we send mails to publishers, just like we take time to read, publishers take even more time. So if I've taken 2 years, they might take 4 years. And that is something, that's when I say, please, you know, trust us, we're doing our jobs. We've got your book on submission. We're doing the follow-ups as professionally and as gently as we can. Now leave it with us, and no, don't bother me, go write your next book. But Saranya, I think I could lead straight into Saranya's experience with how long it took. And I'm sure that every writer who's been published knows that it takes time. And every writer who hasn't published better get a reality check on that. You know, you better think about that. So Saranya, tell me about how you feel about time.
Yeah, I mean, I've forgotten how impatient I was now that I'm holding this. Available at the crossword here. Go pick it up. No, but yeah, it feels surreal because I still can't believe that it's actually out. And it took a long time to hear back from one publisher who rejected us, and then we had another one. And I was okay with waiting for publishers to respond whether they're going to publish it or not. But after saying yes, that wait is so unbearable because for me at least, I had been working on these poems since 2020. And so in my mind, they were ancient. They were very old, and I've been waiting for them to get out there into the world. But for the publisher, it's something that they just got, and it's something that they're just reading. And I've hounded Radhika so much. I think I've called her when she's at weddings, when she's, I think, on her own honeymoon. Sorry, Radhika. But what really helped, what I really believed was talking to the both of you. And I remember, Jay, you called me up, and this is before I told people that we got this deal, where you told me, don't worry, it is happening. Even though nothing was official yet. So that actually made me feel a lot better because just to have a human being at the other end of the line, which was the two of you, and it must be so frustrating to console us and our anxieties, but to have that was very, very reassuring. And so I just had to kind of ride that wave. But also I do believe that things happen at the right time, and it just so happened that waiting for this means that we got 2 books coming out, which is unbelievable to me. So yeah, I guess it's a blessing.
So this sort of also, you know, when I think about it, we walk that very, very fine line between writer and publisher. So we work for our writers categorically. So very often I'm asked, do you work for Penguin? Do you work for Harper? Do you work for Westland? No, I don't. I work for her and her and her. and any other writers of ours, I know there are a few in the audience, but we work for our writers. We always have their backs, and we will fight the battles we can. Sometimes it's our job to tell a writer that, this is not possible. But I also want to say, when Saranya, was so worried and Radhika said, like, what should we do? I rang Saranya and I said, in our business, our word is gold. So once I know that it's been committed, I know it's just time. It's just waiting for paperwork. The intention is very clear. But I know that, and to communicate that to our writers and say that it's happening, it's real, when they don't know anything. They don't know the people they're dealing with. They only know us. So it's that line that we walk, and at the same time, if we keep following up with a publisher to the point of nagging them, they're going to reject the book for no reason, except that they're annoyed. So we're constantly following up very, very quietly. We use, if Saranya's done a nice poetry walk, I would send that to the publisher and say, hey, this is what our author did. I thought you'd be interested, rather than saying, have you read it yet? So it's that line that we walk all the time. So we have to make sure that publishers are not angry. We have to make sure our writers are reassured that we have their backs and that we are doing our jobs. And that we still believe in the book. So very often what happens is, with this delay, people think that we've lost faith. It's not losing faith, it's just the time it takes in our industry. It's unchangeable. I wish we could change it.
Sorry. I just wanted to say that this is my first time at JBN, and thank you so much for having me here. It's been amazing. I have eaten kachoris in Jaipur, which has been a lifelong dream. And for the first time, I'm actually interacting with some of the publishers who, I would vaguely have heard from Jaya or Smita that, we made this pitch. But people have been telling me, and they were such strong proponents of it, and I'm so sorry we couldn't acquire it then, but it's so great that it came out with Penguin. And for the first time, I really understand what went into getting my books out, because I just hear the after event brief, but you guys were on the front line, and thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that hearing you and Radhika say that just wait, it'll happen, that itself was so reassuring, because I was like, no, Jay said it, so I'm waiting.
Thank you.
Like, that was it. I was like, your word is God. I'm going to trust it.
Well, I have to say, after I submitted my first manuscript to you, because we were doing this for 5 years, right? I was writing this for 5 years. And every 6 months, I get a call from Jay saying, hey, how's the writing going? And I'd lie and say, it's going really, really well. I've written 14 chapters when I'd written 3. So we did this dance for about 5 years. And then eventually, the manuscript was ready. And Jay was like, come on. And I got about 15 messages from her saying, don't worry, it's going to be fine. Just send it. We'll work with it, all of that. And so finally, after all of this, my baby for 5 years, I sent her the manuscript. And there was just radio silence after that. Not even, yep, I got the email. Not even that, right? And so I'm just waiting. And then for like a month, you know how you go on a really good date and it's a really nice guy and you come back and you're like, is he going to call me? When is he going to call me? Have I said something? Why isn't he calling me? I did that for about a month in my head. And then finally, after a month, I messaged her on WhatsApp, so casual. I was like, hey, how are you? I was just wondering, if you had a minute to maybe look at the manuscript, what did you think? And nothing. I got absolutely nothing. But it took 2 years after that for the book to actually come out. And I think during that time, I was a nervous wreck. And I think with every book, I've kind of now begun to understand that that is really how publishing works. But I can totally understand for first-time writers, every day of your baby being with somebody else is so frightening.
So I'm also very pleased. I think me and time is a thing. But I want to talk about these 3 women and their writing journeys a little bit. So thank you for all the faith. Each one of them has, with Trish, when she wrote the memoir, and we were talking about what next, the one thing we both knew is that she had to continue. And then I said, how about romance? And, by the morning, I had a plot. in my email. I read that immediately. So I had a plot in my email by the next morning, and so I'm also very pleased to say that Trisha's been published, her romances are published by Bloomsbury, and they mailed yesterday to say that Trisha's next book has been acquired. It's really fun. Yeah. So, and now, you know, Akshita's novel is now a more manageable size in my head. And it's under submission, but we're really sure it will sell because it's got all the things that we want to read and all the stories we want to read, and her writing is impeccable. With Saranya, when she came to us with this big book of poems, we went back to her with a big idea. We're not going to say much about it because you'll have to buy the book when it comes out, but it's nonfiction, putting her head in a completely different place, and we love the fact that our writers are so ready to experiment based on wild ideas we have. So they journey with us on those wild ideas. And equally, I'd like to say when they come to us with crazy ideas, we say, okay, I don't know what you're saying as yet, but we're there, we're your agents, and we'll walk with you on this one. So that's really what it is. Anything before we open it up? Anything you want to say?
I think it's really important also to have like that regular touch point with each other to keep a conversation going, because sometimes really hard things need to be said. And you know, you pointed out that you'll say you've written 14 chapters when you've written 3, or sometimes a book is just, the market is not ready for a book. And these are painful and personal for both agent and writer. And the ability to talk about it, to give each other grace and to accept grace as well, is something that I think we've learned journeying together. But it's important to just keep talking, keep in open communication, not hiding. Just don't do things behind your agent's back.
So like all other agents.
So, you know, we make it a point to keep in touch with our authors at least once a month. Like I said, it's about the writing, it's about that personal connection and relationship we do have. So we call everybody, and often it's to just chat. You know, we don't have any work to talk about. You know, very often, like, Akshita will tell me about what she's writing in the newspaper, common friends. Suddenly I'm getting to know and I'm learning about her walks, and I'm determined to go to Bombay to do one. With Trish, we're currently talking about her dog. I just love hearing all the stories about her dog, you know. And she's finished her second book, and we're on a third manuscript. So, you know, this is the other thing. Our head has to be in very different spaces with the same writer all the time, and multiply that by 150. That's our day. That's why I can't return calls. I can't email immediately. I can't WhatsApp immediately, because there is such a lot of stuff that comes our way. So on a single day, we answer emails, we talk to our writers, we submit books, we look at contracts, we do accounts every day. So my husband, in fact, one day he said, you know, you're very disorganized, very disorganized. You should list everything you do. And I do so many things in a day that I had to lie down. I said, I can't deal with it. Looking back at my day was harder than having the day, you know? So it's not possible. But this is what we do, and our writers challenge us every day because they want to do crazy, beautiful, dazzling things, and we want to do that with them. We want to say, okay, you want to write a 200,000 word book. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but yes, I'm here, I'm still here, still standing. You know, that's the kind of thing we need to do. But if you look at each one of these women, our head has to be in different spaces for reading, for submission in different markets. We submit to various markets at the same time. The follow-up is not just with Penguin India, Harper India, it's to 20 people. The submissions happen to 40 people. And we don't do forms. We write individual submissions for everyone. And then we bug them. Every time I make a submission, I don't want to search in my inbox. I'll write to them and say, send me the latest version. I'm going to submit your book today. So they all know the drill, that they have to send it to me that day.
And the other lovely thing that you've been doing over the past 5 years, especially when the pandemic really fragmented us and made it difficult to travel, was realizing that you could nurture a community of your writers in different cities. So there's a Jacaranda Lit Chicks WhatsApp group that has become a ladies who lunch, breakfast, meet, and just being able to bounce ideas off each other and speak openly. So we don't feel like we're in competition in the markets, or not even in competition for our agents' attention, because we're supporting each other, we're bouncing ideas
and
off.
become genuine friends through all of, created a community and genuine friendships through this. So I think that is the hallmark of a good agent as well. Not only having that that personal relationship with you one-on-one, but also fostering a community of people who inspire each other, and being a therapist when you need to be.
Trisha, tell them about that book which you swore you'd never write, and then after lunch.
Which one?
The world building. Well, so basically, there was a book she swore she'd never write. She said, "No, I'm doing romance fiction. I'm only going to do the straightforward plots." And then me and another author were talking to her and were saying, "Well, that's such a pity because we enjoyed your earlier work, etc." And then she went back, and I believe she started work.
Yes, and then I started. I put that book on the shelf for 7 years, and now I've started writing it again. Every book has its day. Every dog has its day. Every book has its day. So that book is back now. Yes.
I mean, the session is called Authors and Agents, but it's like you said, Trish, that it really does feel like it's about friendship, because I mean, the last 3 days itself at JLF, the way that we've just hung out as people, and even Radhika and I meet for coffee and we talk about her work and her research in Bombay, and it's just so nice to be seen as a human being and as a person, and that really inspires your writing a lot more, because I genuinely do feel like that someone believes in the work that I'm doing and has faith in what I'm going to write. So the second book that we took on, it's such a huge mammoth task, and I was telling Akshita how terrifying it is to write it, because it's non-fiction, because it's such a huge universe. But I do know that somewhere Radhika had some faith in it, and Jay, you had some faith in it, and it's just having that, it's like, it is a camaraderie, it is a friendship, and that really helps me, because I'm like, okay, no, they see something, so maybe I should write it. Yeah.
So, the other thing that I think is important to navigate in this universe of writer and agent is books that get abandoned. So I'm not sure how any of, I think Trish has had one that went dormant. Akshita's also had one that she had to go back and do a rewrite. But mainly, I think some books are just not what the reader expects from them. And it's our job as, I don't like to use the word gatekeeper, but really their crew, their champions, if you will. It's our job to say that this is not working, the writing is not working, the story is not working. So the other thing that we sort of have every day in our working life is we have to be brutally honest, and sometimes, we're never very trigger happy. We never just pick up the phone and say anything. We always think about it for a couple of days, sometimes a couple of weeks, because some things are very hard to say. I've had books that have been, it's taken me, one of my very beautiful Filipino novels took 7 years to sell. And it was my job to tell that writer, I still love it, have faith in it, and it will sell. I just said, don't think about it now. And it took me 7 years to sell it, but I did not lose faith. But on the other side, I have to call this writer every 2 or 3 months and have random conversations with her, because there's nothing else to say. So this brings me to a point where, all writers are very anxious about not hearing from us. And we can't say, like I use the phrase horse's mouth very freely. It's not what I have to say. I've read the book, I like it, I've submitted it, or Radhika's read it, or Smita's read it, but what we really struggle with is not hearing from the publisher. So we're not dependent just on our own opinions or our own time. We are waiting just as much as you guys are, or even more, because we carry enormous guilt. If when your contract didn't come, oh my God, you should see my completely blowing up WhatsApp messages with your publisher.
I could
But-
not tell because from my end, you guys were so like good at consoling me and reassuring me. It'll happen.
So, yeah, so now, like that, we can go on forever. So I think it would be lovely to hear from other writers with questions they might have. Okay, you. The first row, yeah. Next to Radhika.
Thank you so much for this insightful session, and congratulations to all three authors. Being an author myself, I would like to ask this question, and it comes from a deep insecurity. Whenever there's a talk about switching genres, I want both author and agent's perspective on this. How do you not let market awareness interfere with your author's voice inside?
I guess that's a question more for me. I don't think the market should drive any writing. Like Trisha mentioned it, so did Akshita. I think that you have to write the book that you want to write. And it's up to us as professionals to find the right avenue for it. I don't think I would ever tell a writer, unless they were specialists in that subject, Like with Trish, definitely I looked at the fact that she could write humor when she sent me the memoir that hasn't sold. And I said, if we'll do romance, women's fiction, I know it will be funny. So it's more like directing her in a direction that's good for her, not really writing to the market. Does anyone have an opinion?
I think as an author, if I were to write for the market as opposed to what I'm excited about, the book wouldn't be very good. So as long as I'm excited by it, the book will show that.
I would like to say one thing though, that if you judge your success by sales and compare it to the best-selling book in the genre you've written in, that's not going to help. Personally, I look at it as, did I tell the story I wanted to tell, and has it made me a better human being? My most successful book so far has been my first book, which won 3 major literary prizes in a small country, Singapore. And it's been adapted for the stage, it's been made into a dance, all sorts of things. But it's not paying the bills in terms of sales. And I think what we do is really more about humanity. It's because to make art, to write, to tell stories is to be human. And we do that. And we tell our stories so that you will tell yours. See yourselves in our stories maybe, and then say, no, that's not right, and tell your own stories. And that, I think, is the real success.
We have time for one more question. Maybe somebody at the back. How about you?
Hi. Okay, thank you. So my question is very simple and from the heart. So I'm writing a book, fiction again, and I just need to know that how can I get in touch with you, or somebody who can help me reach you, and then I hope I don't have to wait like that, like she just said no response and heart failed. So
I'm sure you'll have to wait. 100%
Yes.
sure. 100% sure.
So how do we approach you, like?
Off our website, we open it up for submissions a few times a year, so that's when you can submit to us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Do we have time for one more? I'd love to get you, sir, a man.
Sorry. I must confess I'm a first-time accidental writer, and I wrote a book of poems because my daughter, who's very loving, but she's an ICE agent when she wants me to go the way she wants, and she said, you write a book of poems, and I said, I haven't written anything on poems for decades. So she said, no, you're going to write it. And she gave me a deadline, and I wrote a book, and I expected it to sink, There are millions of people writing, and I started off with rejection, and I self-published it. But I was very surprised that it started going all over the world. It went to USA. It's purely online. It's with Barnes & Noble in Canada. It's with Nile, with Saxo, Hugendubel, Sandman in Taiwan. I'm totally mystified, really. I have absolutely no idea why it went. I just bought a small marketing package with a small publishing company, but I have complete rights for the book. So, and I'm a newbie, completely. I've, kind of given rise to a vagrant book. It's going away. I do not know why it's going, where it's going, but seems to be traveling. Yeah, so I want your advice. What should I do, and what an agent can play in this? And do you do only women's books, or do you...
Okay, two things. If a book is sold, then when we can't do anything with it. It's already out in the universe, it's out in the universe, so we can't do anything with it.
I have full rights to it.
It doesn't matter. You've put it out there, it's on the internet, that means it's out. The second thing is, maybe we could talk about this outside later, and I'll take one more question in the time.
You could just put my name, Chandranil Dasgupta, today's Google search, and you would find it. Yeah.
That gentleman with glasses, how about you?
Yeah, thank you. I just sit.
Sure.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, about narratives from marginalized, identities. I'm from Kashmir. I don't want to make this about myself, but basically, I've faced a lot of difficulty with basically getting published because some of the stories do not align with the kind of things that are written in literary journals around. It's been a bit difficult considering that a lot of the stories may not align with the kind of the way stories are, the MAF, a lot of MAF writing that becomes very westernized and stuff like that, right? And of course, the themes are have become very uniform of sorts. It's just, what advice would you have for an emerging writer from a marginalized kind of identity group trying to kind of write and find a publishing space?
So my answer is, I represent Hansda Savendra Shekhar. He's a very brave writer from the Adivasi community. We've worked together for years, and he just writes the stories. He writes about his life, his stories, his people. And I think that if you write that with a lot of faith and take time to tell the stories sincerely, I think there is space for those stories to be read. There is space for those stories to be read. Just be true to yourself. And I think that's all the time we have today. Thank you for being such a sweet audience. We'll be outside, happy to answer questions outside.